This is Perp back with another video, and I just got done watching the brand new limited series coming out of Netflix, Boy Swallows Universe. Pause. This is based off a novel, I believe, but this has about 7 episodes. Each episode is almost like an hour long. This takes place in Australia, which I really like. The aesthetics of Australia, just the setting is really dope. We're in the 80s, mid 80s. But this is a very interesting story that plays out because it starts off, we have old boy from Vikings. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. His character Lyle, the stepdad of Gus and Eli being our main character, gets himself in a bit of trouble. They show that right off the bat, where Lyle gets pretty much yoked up and taken somewhere we don't know. But the first 2 episodes kind of explain that, so we kind of get an understanding of who these characters are. And like I said, Eli being our main character, the youngest brother, he is very outspoken, very smart. The actor that played him did a phenomenal job, you know what I'm saying? And he has a very interesting family. It's a very dysfunctional family, but he's got somewhat of a family, friend of the family named Slim. He just got out of doing 25 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And his mom is kind of going with Lyle, and they're kind of dealing with their kind of demons, where his mom had to deal with drugs. You know what I'm saying? She is definitely, they show her kind of dealing with addiction, and also Lyle trying to be the best stepdad, but he's not the best stepdad because he's still caught up in the criminal world, which leads a lot of our different characters on different series of events that play out throughout the series. So, Eli is very close with his stepfather, Lyle, loves his brother, Gus. Gus has not said a word since he was 8 years old because of a traumatic experience that they went through as kids. And he kind of uses his finger to kind of write out words and stuff. And I liked how they kind of show you exactly, like, within effects, what he's saying. Now, this is where things get really interesting, knowing what we know now, and Eli kind of following Lyle around, kind of getting the gist of what he actually does, because he's a very curious kid. He's always going to ask questions, you know what I'm saying? He has this other kid that goes to the same school as him, Darren, which is his mom is kind of like the plug for Lyle's character. And that is pretty interesting because Darren ends up kind of taking over for his mom later on in the series. But that aside, things start to get really hectic with Lyle's character, and it's almost like a domino effect, because as soon as Lyle gets caught up in what he gets caught up in, as far as stepping on the drugs, you know what I'm saying, trying to do his own side hustle, put things away. And this leads to the introduction of one of our big antagonists, Ivan Kroll. He's kind of like the guy that keeps everybody in check. He works for Lyle's boss, that he owns this prosthetics company, but he's obviously corrupt. But he uses Ivan as pretty much his muscle, and obviously now Lyle has to deal with the consequences of his actions, which leads him getting taken away by Ivan and his people. But also, this is where Eli loses a finger, because they're trying to get information out of these kids. And this is the first time Gus actually speaks again, and he starts to kind of speak more and more. But the interesting interesting thing about Gus is he can potentially see into the future, or he just says he sees images. They're like random, like kind of images that like, but then they end up coming true. So that's really interesting. So you kind of have some type of, I guess you would call it, magical element. Also, before I go any further, you'll see this red phone being used a few times. You know, it was a big thing when before this series even came out. That's like the first thing they kind of promoted, and they hint at exactly who that may be at the other side of the phone, and it's possibly like a future version of Gus, which is kind of crazy to think about. But you know, anyways, after Lyle kind of goes away, this is very traumatic. This very traumatic events start to kind of play out, starting with the mom, Frankie, and her kind of going back into going to jail because she pretty much covers for Lyle when she doesn't really need to. Leads her to kind of be really depressed. She hasn't seen her kids, and her letters aren't, you know, going through or nothing like that. And the whole system surrounding them, you know, as far as the cops and everybody, are very corrupt. And so Eli wants to kind of go on this adventure to kind of make things right. He wants to find out who what happens to Lyle, like if he's still alive. And then he also breaks in to go see his mom, which is so crazy. That was a crazy scene, and just so many crazy series of events that kind of play out that kind of shape and mold Eli in a way. It's a very interesting coming of age story, because you got this very smart 13-year-old that he's just getting all these traumatic things happening, losing Slim, probably one of his closest members of his like kind of extended family, even though Slim's not his actual family. That still had an impact on him. And also, I forgot to mention that throughout the series, you're going to see Eli writing to this other inmate, you know, that's like his pen pal, which ends up coming back full circle towards the end of the series, which I really like that, you know. And you kind of see things being put in place the first 5 episodes, because the last 2 episodes there's a time skip where we see an older Eli. And shout outs to Sophie Wilde. She's also in this. She's like a reporter. Her character is kind of plays a really interesting pivotal part of Eli's life later on, where he is inspired to be a journalist, and he ends up getting that dream and whatnot. But there's a lot of dope elements that, you know, deal with his family, like after the stuff with Lyle and his mom going to jail, they end up going to stay with their father. And this is where you learn exactly what happened with the incident, which there was this car accident, and that was just so traumatic for their father. He just was kind of closed off. I forget exactly what the phobia he had. He doesn't like to be around a lot of people and stuff like that, and he really blames himself for a lot of things, and thinks that Frankie wants nothing to do with him, which leads him to turn to alcohol and just become this alcoholic. But I really like Robert's character, their father, and you see that he actually means well compared to somebody like Lyle, or even somebody like Teddy that comes around later when we get to that time skip. Teddy being Lyle's best friend, and he always kind of liked Frankie and was always kind of plotting. So once everything kind of settles down, for the most part, they're just Eli's just waiting for his mom to be released. This is where we get the time skip, where we're introduced to a older Eli, a slightly older Gus. And also, I gotta mention, Gus is really into like charity work and whatnot. He has this relationship with a character named Shelly, and Shelly had to deal with like muscular dystrophy at a young age. So that's kind of like the inspiration that Gus gets to like get into this charity work. But also, we see an older Eli where, he's really hell-bent on becoming a journalist, and it's not as easy as he thought it was going to be. He's been saving up all this money because they finally found Lyle's stash. They were just waiting for their mom to get home, and they wanted to really buy that house they always wanted. But Gus ends up taking that money and putting it into this charity to kind of help Shelly and whatnot in her situation, which I would have been pissed, to be honest. But anyways, a lot of interesting things happen in these last 2 episodes as far as Teddy and Frankie kind of getting together. Eli's not really liking that because he, got word that it was Teddy's fault for ratting out Lyle to, Ivan and whatnot. And that whole relationship was toxic. He really was like beating the shit out of Frankie, and this led to them ultimately all just going back to their father, Robert's house. And it's interesting to see all these traumatic things happen, and then this whole family goes from being dysfunctional to being a functional family again. It's actually bringing them all closer together, you know what I'm saying? Even though we have all these traumatic things that's happened leading up to this, but then they finally kind of wrap things up with getting rid of Titus, the big bad Colonel Sanders, you know what I'm saying, and exposing all his corruption. They're able to close things off with the Ivan character, even though he's a menace, because he was there was just like award ceremony for Gus for all the nice things he's done with this charity, raising almost $250,000, or $250,000. And he actually goes to Ivan goes to the spot after everything kind of blows up in his face, and he's on the hunt to kill both Caitlin and Eli, but mostly Eli. He wants all the smoke with him. Stabs him in front of everybody. Robert catches a blade to the neck. He ends up surviving, though. It almost seemed like that Eli was going to die in that moment, but Gus ends up saving him at the end of everything, and they're able to kind of live their lives. And you see Eli ending off just telling his story, because he's been narrating throughout the whole entire series, and the whole family's back together. They're one big happy family. And I thought this series was really fucking dope and creative, and just how unique it felt as far as a coming of age story. It's very brutal, very emotional, and very lighthearted when it needs to be, and also humorous. So that's just kind of my thoughts and just the breakdown of what I've watched. If you get around to watching this, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But until next time, I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.